Tenuto. Let's talk about tenuto. Do, 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 do. Tenuto is often called the long and connected sound. And, it's pretty easy to see with the shape of it that makes a lot of sense. It's saying, hey, play this note nice and long. And we usually think about that in terms of note shapes. So this would be exactly this type of note. Do, 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 do. So if we see a bunch of tenutos in the music, then we're generally being told to connect those sounds. Now it actually has a second meaning, but if we see, like I just said, if we see a bunch of them in a row, let's talk about the first meaning. If we see a bunch of them in a row, we've got a really connected sound. So your air should do what you see on the screen. Your air should do this. And then your job is to tongue each time the beat reaches a new note. And in this case, instead of two, 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 I'm thinking do, 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 do. So we use a lighter tongue. And what we end up with is this super duper connected sound where the only divisions we hear are these little tongues that just separate the sounds. But they're just slices. It's like one giant sub sandwich, 10 feet long. And then they decide to cut it into different segments. But this is like, only the width of a knife blade, just a little tiny slice. Otherwise, the whole sandwich, if you look at it from far away, it's complete, right? There's basically no slices. That's just the idea of this air never, ever, ever stopping. So if your air stops, the sound stops, and that creates a gap. If we look back at the note shapes, right? If the air stops, the sound stops. So this is just a gap in your air. So in order to play those connected tenuto sounds, your air has to constantly flow, right? All right, now there's another case here where we've got just one tenuto in a group of other notes. And in this case, a tenuto sort of acts like a weaker accent. So this note is supposed to be played a little bit heavier, but we don't really punch the beginning of the note like we would for an accent. If this was an accent, we might kind of punch the beginning of the note and then let it come down. But for a tenuto, we tend to just give this note a little bit more weight. So there's two ways to think about that. One way you could think about that would be to just make that one slightly louder. Okay, push on it a little bit. So that's one way to go. I'll try to be more clear. Okay, but it's kind of hard to not make that an accent. If you're thinking I'm going to play loud, then it's kind of hard. So I like to tend to think about this like making it heavier, and it's more like it bulges in the middle, in the core of the sound. So we create this additional bulge to the sound when you get there that gives it extra power. So I don't actually tongue louder. I don't actually attack the note harder because I still want that connected sound. But what I do is I add air. So remember, the space inside these note shapes really represents airflow. So right here, the air flows more. Try that with me, starting here. Ready, and feel that bump in there? Again. So that's how we create the tenuto, where it's more like a weak accent or a heavy note. So it has two uses. It can make a note sound heavy or more important, or you can have a whole bunch of them in a row, and it means really connect those notes together. So here we are in the music. These are examples of the lots of tenutos in a row. This one over here is an example of the make that note sound more important. So I'll see if I can make up a little song here and demonstrate what's going on. Let's start with the top line first. right, so in this measure, you can contrast do 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 do. If it didn't have tenutos, it would have been. Sorry, not like that. Can you hear those clear attacks? Two, 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 two. But instead, I played. Do, do, do. It's almost like I'm trying to hide my tongue by making it so light it's barely there. Then when I got here, this is just like the emphasis on a word. Emphasis. Emphasis. Right? So we can change the emphasis of a word. We can say Colorado. We can say Colorado. We can say Colorado. We can say Colorado. We can change the emphasis in a word that we say, so we can also change the emphasis in a rhythm, right? So in this case, we're emphasizing the third beat. So it tends to just mean that note in the melody needs a little more strength, whatever's going on. All right, here's one more example here where I can make up a little tune, and this is a bunch of tenutos in a row. So it's like, well, what's the difference? Well, how about this? I'll play it first as if there's no tenutos. All right, now with tenuto. Without it. With it. Okay, since 16th notes are really, really quick, it almost sounds like I'm playing them staccato, when really I'm just giving each one a clear tongue. But when I go to tenuto, I really make sure my air flows without stopping. Remember that rectangle shape? So in order to play that measure, I need to make sure my air never, ever stops. Like this. Nice long stream of air with lots of little tongues in it. All right. So there's an example of how tenuto might show up in your music. If there's a whole bunch of them in a row, super smooth, super connected, make sure that your air never stops, and learn how to use a light tongue. Try da da or do do with a D syllable instead of a T. And then if you have a single one that's out on its lonesome, then that usually means that note needs a little bit of extra strength, needs to sound a little heavier, and we do that by bulging the air. That takes some practice. So tenuto is a really cool little articulation. I hope that you understand more about how to use it, and I'll see you in the next video.